Richest countries in the world 2021. What do people think when they think about the richest countries in the world? Some very small and very rich countries, like Luxembourg, Singapore and Hong Kong, benefit from having sophisticated financial sectors and tax regimes that help attract foreign investments and professional talent. Others like Qatar and Brunei have large reserves of hydrocarbons or other lucrative natural resources. But what do we mean when we say a country is rich, especially in an era of growing income inequality between the rich and everyone else? While gross domestic product, GDP, measures the value of all goods and services produced in a nation, dividing this output by the number of full-time residents is a better way of determining how rich or poor one country's population is relative to another's. The reason why rich often equals small then becomes clear. These countries' economies are disproportionately large compared to their small populations. However, only when taking into account inflation rates and the cost of local goods and services can we get a more accurate picture of a nation's average standard of living. The resulting figure is what is called purchasing power parity, PPP, which is often expressed international dollars to allow comparisons between different countries. Should we automatically assume that in nations where this figure is particularly high the overall population is visibly better off than in most other places in the world? A new kind of inequality emerged too. Some people have been able to work from home, some others lost their livelihood and found themselves without much of a safety net. Large holes in the most celebrated welfare systems in the world were exposed. In the 10 world's poorest countries, according to data from the International Monetary Fund, the average per capita purchasing power is less than $1,200. In the 10 richest is close to $80,000. For example, many nations in our ranking are tax havens, which means wealth originally generated in other countries ends up inflating their GDP because of sophisticated accounting and legal practices. More broadly, it is estimated that over 15% of global jurisdictions are tax havens and that about 40% of global foreign direct investment flows are so-called phantom transactions, financial investments passing through empty corporate shells with no real influence on a country's economy and people's financial well-being. Add to that the unequal distribution of resources, and it becomes easy to understand why even in very rich countries live very poor people. Here is the 10 richest countries in the world. Denmark. Current international dollars, 58,932. That also explains why when we say that the per capita purchasing of the average Danish is close to $60,000 the statement is truer than in the case of those countries where few have a lot and many have a lot less. The Kingdom of Denmark has a modern and internationally competitive service-based economy, which also means that during the pandemic both household and public finances were less impacted in comparison to nations relying heavily on manufacturing activities, tourism or petroleum products exports. Hong Kong SAR. Current international dollars, 59,519. The economy of Hong Kong is characterized by low taxation and no capital gains or inheritance levies, no tariffs on the import or export of goods and full ownership of their business for foreigners with no citizenship, residency or nationality requirements. All the while, Hong Kong contends with New York for the title for the city with the largest number of ultra-high net worth individuals in the world, about 9,000 people with $30 million or more in net worth. Brunei Darussalam. Current international dollars, 62,371. Yet, it is not all roses in the Sultanate, and not just because Bolkiah is no longer the wealthiest monarch in the world, a title he held for many years. Thailand's King Maha Vajiralongkorn is about $15 billion richer. Although data is scarce, it has been estimated that 40% of its 450,000-strong population earn less than $1,000 a year. Luckily, the country was spared the worst of the COVID-19 pandemic with only a few hundred recorded cases. United States. Current international dollars, 63,415. However, those in top quintile of the population and earning over $60,000 a year managed in many cases to keep working from home, saw their stock investments grow in value, and received stimulus checks on top of that. In other words, if you are an American and your income is a fraction of the average GDP per capita, it is fair to argue that someone else is probably eating your proverbial lunch. Norway. Current international dollars, 65,800. Yet Norwegians know that with great wealth comes great responsibility. Unlike many other rich nations, high per capita GDP figures are truly a reflection of people's financial well-being, since Norway has amongst the lowest income inequality gaps in the world. Switzerland. Current international dollars, 72,873. According to the IMF, to a swift and sustained policy response through emergency spending and containment measures, but also to the makeup of the Swiss economy itself, with its solid public and household finances, competitive export industries, and low dependency on contact-intensive sectors. Qatar. Current international dollars, 93,508. It's not only the oversupply and demand crisis of last year and the exacerbating effect of COVID-19, oil prices have been in steady and sometimes dramatic decline since the mid-2010s. The per capita GDP of a Qatari citizen was over $143,222 in 2014, it was just $97,846 a year later, and nowadays it is even lower than that. Yet, with only about 12% of the residents being Qatari nationals, the country, similarly to many other Gulf states, saw COVID-19 spreading especially among low-income migrant workers living in crowded quarters at furious speed. Ireland. Current international dollars, 94,391. That all changed in 2020, economic growth more than halved from the previous levels, although it is expected to rebound nicely this year. A nation of fewer than 5 million inhabitants, Ireland was one of the hardest hit by the 2008 financial crisis. Following some politically difficult reform measures like deep cuts to public sector wages and restructuring its banking industry, the island nation regained its fiscal health, boosted its employment rates and saw its per capita GDP almost double in a short amount of time. And while they are undoubtedly better off than they used to be, according to data from the OECD, the national household per capita disposable income is actually lower than the overall member country's average, about $25,300 a year versus $33,600. With a considerable gap between the richest and poorest, the top 20% of the population earns almost 5 times as much as the bottom 20%. Most families would balk at the idea that they are wealthy. Two. Singapore. Current international dollars, 97,056. With virtually no natural resources, Singapore pulled itself up by its bootstraps through hard work and smart policy, becoming one of the most business-friendly places in the world. Today, Singapore is a thriving trade, manufacturing and financial hub. Most importantly, 98% of the adult population is now literate. One. Luxembourg. Current international dollars, 118,001. Luxembourg uses a large share of its wealth to deliver better housing, healthcare and education to its people, who by far enjoy the highest standard of living in the Eurozone. Yet, while both the global financial crisis and the pressure from the EU and OECD to reduce banking secrecy have had little impact on the economy, the coronavirus outbreak forced many businesses to close and workers to lose their jobs. Still, through effective testing and contact tracing measures, Luxembourg has weathered the pandemic better than most of its European neighbors. The country topped the $100,000 mark in per capita GDP in 2014 and has never looked back ever since.